Chosen one, pause for a moment and let this land gently but firmly in your spirit, because what I'm about to say isn't hype and it isn't flattery. It's truth that has been forged through pressure, patience, and perseverance. God is shockingly proud of you, not in a distant way, not in a casual nod from heaven way, but in a deep, intentional, knowing way. The kind of pride that comes from watching someone endure what should have broken them and still choose integrity, humility, and faith when no one was clapping. You didn't arrive here by accident. You didn't stumble into this season by luck. Every delay, every closed door, every moment where you felt overlooked was shaping you into exactly who he needed for what's coming next. There were times you questioned yourself, times you wondered if you misheard God, times you thought maybe you were asking for too much or believing for something that was never meant for you. But what you couldn't see then was that heaven was watching closely, measuring not your speed, but your obedience, not your perfection, but your persistence. While others quit when it got uncomfortable, you stayed. While others compromised to get ahead, you waited. While others grew bitter, you grew deeper. That matters more than you realize. God doesn't just use gifted people. He uses grounded people. He uses those who can be trusted when the pressure is high and the spotlight is bright. You've been becoming quietly, steadily, sometimes painful, the kind of person who can carry weight without dropping it. That's why the process felt heavier than it did for others. That's why the lessons repeated until they stuck. That's why you couldn't escape the refining even when you tried. It wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God wasn't holding you back, he was holding you together. He knew what kind of storms you'd face, what kind of responsibility you'd carry, what kind of influence would eventually come through your hands and your voice. And he refused to rush what required maturity. There were nights when your prayers weren't eloquent, they were exhausted. Nights when all you could say was help me, or guide me, or please don't let this be for nothing. And heaven didn't roll its eyes at those prayers. Heaven leaned in. Angels don't need fancy language to understand desperation wrapped in faith. God heard every whisper, every sigh, every silent tear. He saw the choices you made when no one was watching, when doing the right thing cost you something real. Those moments didn't go unnoticed. They were recorded not just in memory, but in purpose. You're becoming exactly who he needed, not who the world demanded, not who people tried to mold you into, not who trauma tried to harden you into. You're becoming steady where you used to be reactive, disciplined where you used to be impulsive, discerned where you used to be confused. That didn't happen overnight. And it didn't happen by chance. That happened because you kept saying yes in small ways. Yes to growth, yes to correction, yes to staying soft in hard season, yes to faith, even when evidence was thin. Was a reason you couldn't stay comfortable. A reason restlessness followed you even in places that looked good on the outside. God was stirring something deeper. He was calling you upward, not louder, not flashier, but higher in character, higher in vision, higher in responsibility. You felt it when old conversations stopped satisfying you, when old habits stopped working, when old dreams felt too small. That wasn't you being ungrateful. That was you outgrowing what no longer fit the calling on your life. And let's be honest, some of what you survived wasn't fair. Some of what you endured wasn't necessary for everyone else, but it was necessary for you. Because what God is entrusting to you requires compassion without weakness, strength without arrogance, confidence without cruelty. You had to learn how to stand alone without becoming isolated, how to be humble without shrinking, how to lead without needing approval. Those lessons only come through lived experience, not theory. There were people who misunderstood you, who projected their insecurities onto your obedience, who tried to label your consistency as arrogance or your boundaries as rejection. That hurt, especially because your intentions were pure. But even that served a purpose. It taught you not to build your identity on applause or acceptance. It taught you how to hear God's voice above the noise. It taught you how to move forward without needing everyone to agree with you. That's leadership, that's calling, that's becoming. God is proud not just of where you are, but of who you're becoming in the process of getting there. He's proud that you didn't let disappointment turn you cynical. Proud that you didn't let delay make you lazy. Proud that you didn't let isolation make you desperate for the wrong connection. You waited, you watched, you worked on yourself when no one else was paying attention. That's rare. That's valuable. That's usable. You may not see the full picture yet, but pieces are starting to come together. Opportunities aligning, clarity sharpening, confidence settling in quietly, not loudly. You're not chasing anymore, you're attracting. You're not forcing doors, you're recognizing timing. That's growth, that's wisdom earned, not borrowed. And heaven is smiling at that shift because it means you're ready for more than you think. There's a depth in you now that wasn't there before. A calm that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. You don't need to announce it, you don't need to defend it. It shows in how you respond, how you wait, how you move. You're no longer proving, you're positioning. And positioning always comes before promotion. What you're stepping into will require you to remember these moments. The quiet victories, the unseen discipline, the prayers that felt unanswered at the time. Because when responsibility increases, memory keeps you grounded. God is shaping you into someone who can carry success without losing soul, influence without losing intimacy, authority without losing empathy. And even now, there are still layers being refined, still edges being softened, still strength being built. Not because you're lacking, but because what's ahead is weighty and sacred. God isn't done with you yet. He's still working in the unseen, still arranging connections, still aligning. Timing, still preparing hearts, including yours. So if you feel like you're in between, like you've outgrown where you were but haven't fully arrived where you're going, that's not confusion, that's transition. And transition is holy ground. It's where trust is tested and faith is strengthened. It's where identity is clarified and motives are purified. Don't rush it. Don't resent it. You are not behind. You are becoming. And the becoming matters just as much as the arrival, because who you are when you get there will determine what happens next, how long it lasts, how many people are impacted through you, how faithfully you steward what you're given. God saw the end from the beginning, and he chose you knowing the cost, knowing the process, knowing the weight. That alone should tell you how much he believes in what he placed inside you. So take a breath. Let the pressure remind you that something valuable is being formed. Let the silence sharpen your listening. Let the waiting deepen your trust. Heaven is not disappointed in you. Heaven is not impatient with you. Heaven is proud of you. And even now, as you stand on the edge of what's next, still learning, still stretching, still becoming, God is continuing to shape your heart, your vision, your strength, because what he is preparing to release through you. Life will require you to move with wisdom, courage, humility, and an unshakable sense of purpose as you step forward and begin to walk into the next phase with a clarity that keeps unfolding, a resolve that keeps strengthening, and a calling that continues to draw you deeper into what he has been carefully preparing you for as everything around you starts to shift and align in ways you're only just beginning to notice, because alignment does announce itself loudly at first. It whispers through subtle shifts in your thinking, through the way your reaction change, through the way peace starts to replace panic, even when circumstances haven't caught up yet. That's how you know something real is happening. You're no longer asking the same desperate questions you used to ask. You're no longer bargaining with God from a place of fear. You're starting to trust him from a place of knowing, and knowing doesn't come from easy seasons. It comes from survive. Ones, you didn't just endure difficulty, you learned from it. You didn't just wait, you listened. You didn't just lose it. NGS, you gained discernment. And discernment is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of wisdom. It's the ability to see clearly without becoming cold, to recognize danger without becoming suspicious of everything, to understand people without letting them drain you. That kind of balance only forms when someone has been tested deeply and chosen growth instead of resentment. There was a time you would have reacted emotionally to situations that now barely shake you. That's not because you stopped caring, it's because you started understanding. You learned when to speak, and when silence carries more authority. You learned when to push and when to pause. You learned that not every battle is yours to fight, and not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. That maturity didn't come from books or advice alone. It came from an experience layered with humility. God has been watching. How you handle disappointment, how you handle success, how you handle being alone, how you handle being misunderstood. Every response has been shaping your readiness. Because what it's preparing you for isn't small, and it isn't fragile. It requires emotional stability, spiritual depth, and mental clarity. It requires someone who can stay rooted when things accelerate, someone who doesn't lose themselves when things finally start working. There were moments you felt like you were standing still while everyone else moved forward. But what you didn't see was that while they were moving fast, you were being anchored. While they were collecting experiences, you were collecting wisdom. While they were chasing validation, you were being refined in identity. Speed impresses people, but stability sustains purpose. God was more interested in who you were becoming than how quickly you arrived. And let's talk about the weight you carry quietly, the responsibility you feel even when no one asked you to hold it. The awareness that your choices don't just affect you, but others too. That sense of responsibility isn't pressure, it's calling. It's evidence that you're wired to think beyond yourself, to consider impact, to move intentionally. That's why careless living never satisfied you for long. You were never built for shallow victories or empty applause. You've learned how to sit with discomfort without running from it, how to confront your own blind spots without collapsing into shame, how to receive correction without losing confidence. That balance is rare. Most people swing between arrogance and insecurity, but you've been learning how to stand in truth without self-destruction. That's growth. That's readiness. There were prayers you prayed that God didn't answer the way you wanted, and now you can see why. If he had given you everything you asked for when you asked for it, it would have come at the cost of your foundation. You would have had access without alignment, opportunity without preparation, visibility without protection. God withheld not to hurt you, but to praise, RDA you. He was thinking long-term while you were thinking immediate relief. And even now, there are things unfolding behind the scenes that you don't need to manage or manipulate. Connections being formed, paths being cleared, timing being synchronized. Your job isn't to force outcomes anymore. It's to stay faithful in posture, to keep your heart clean, to keep your spirit receptive, to keep your discipline consistent. Because when movement comes, it will come quickly, and you won't have time to build what you were supposed to establish in the quiet. You're starting to recognize that peace is a signal, not a reward. That when something aligns with God's will, it may still challenge you, but it won't confuse you. It won't require you to betray your values. It won't demand you become someone you're not. That clarity is new, and it's powerful. It means you're no longer easily swayed by pressure or illusion. You're learning to trust the inner confirmation that comes from walking closely with God. There's a reason your circle has changed, a reason certain conversations faded, a reason some people couldn't follow you into this season. Not everyone is meant to go where you're going, and that doesn't make them bad. It just makes them different. You're learning not to drag people forward or hold yourself back for comfort. You're learning that obedience sometimes feels lonely before it feels fulfilling. God is shaping you into someone who can stand in rooms you once prayed to empty, are without shrinking or showing off. Someone who can listen more than they speak, and speak with weight when it matters. Someone who can lead without control, influence without intimidation, guide without ego. That kind of leadership doesn't come from position, it comes from presence. And presence is formed in stillness, not noise. You've noticed how your prayers have changed. Less begging, more alignment. Less panic, more trust. Less explaining, more listening. That's not distance, that's intimacy. That's the shift from seeing God as a last resort to recognizing him as a constant companion. You're not trying to impress him anymore. You're learning to walk with him, and walking with God changes how you see everything. Success stops being the goal and starts being the byproduct. Approval stops being the fuel and purpose takes its place. You're not chasing a feeling, you're building a life. You're not trying to escape pain, you're learning how to steward joy. That perspective only comes after seasons where joy felt delayed and pain felt constant. You didn't lose yourself in the waiting, you found yourself. You found your voice, your boundaries, your convictions. You found out what matters and what doesn't. You found out that you're stronger than you thought and more resilient than you ever realized. That knowledge can't be taken from you. It's been earned. There will be moments ahead when things accelerate and people suddenly notice what's been quietly growing. When opportunity eyes come that would have overwhelmed you before but now feel challenging in a healthy way. When doors open that require you to walk through with confidence, not hesitation. And when that happens, remember this version of yourself. Remember the patience. Remember the discipline. Remember the night you chose faith without guarantees, because what's coming isn't meant to replace who you are. It's meant to reveal it. God isn't elevating a mask. He's elevating a foundation. He's not promoting potential alone. He's honoring preparation. And preparation doesn't always look impressive, but it's unmistakable when the moment arrives. You're becoming someone who understands timing, who doesn't rush God and doesn't resist him either, who knows when to move and when to wait, who trusts that what's meant for you won't miss you, and what misses you wasn't meant for you. That confidence isn't loud, but it's unshakable. There will still be challenges, still moments of stretching, still seasons that require faith, but they won't feel the same as before. You won't feel lost inside them. You won't feel abandoned in them. You'll recognize them as part of the process, not a sign of failure. That shift alone changes everything. God is not surprised by where you are. He's not reconsidering his plan. He's not disappointed in your pace. He's working with precision, not haste. And you are right. Where refinement meets readiness, where humility meets confidence, where patience meets promise. So cool. Continue to show up. Continue to listen. Continue to choose integrity when shortcuts appear. Continue to trust the quiet confirmations. Continue to become. Because even now, as layers settle and clarity deepens, as strength stabilizes and vision sharpens, the work happening inside you is setting the stage for movement that will feel sudden to others, but perfectly timed to heaven. And as you keep walking forward, with steady faith and an open heart, the unfolding will continue in ways that stretch you just enough to remind you that you are still growing, still learning, still aligning, still stepping further into the identity God has been shaping all along. As the path ahead keeps revealing itself one faithful step at a time, because one faithful step always leads to the next, even when the full road isn't visible yet. That's how this journey has always worked for you. God never gave you the entire blueprint up front, not because he was withholding, but because he was building trust. And trust grows when you move without needing to control every outcome. You're learning that obedience doesn't require full understanding. It requires willingness. And your willingness has carried you farther than certainty ever could. You're beginning to notice how differently you handle pressure now. Situations that once would have sent your mind racing no longer steal your peace the same way. You pause. You breathe. You pray. You respond instead of react. That's not accidental. That's evidence of transformation. It means your inner world is becoming more stable than your outer circumstance. And that's the kind of stability God looks for when entrusting. Greater responsibility. There was a season when you thought strength meant never feeling tired, never doubting, never struggling. But now you understand that real strength is showing up even when you feel weak, staying honest, even when it's uncomfortable, and choosing faith even when emotions lag behind truth. God isn't impressed by performance. He's moved by perseverance. And you have persevered in ways that only heaven fully understands. You've also learned that being chosen doesn't mean being spared. It means being shaped. It means being taught how to carry things others would mishandle. It means being refined in private so you can serve effectively in public. That's why your journey has felt intense at times, why your growth required surrender instead of shortcuts. You weren't meant to blend in. You were meant to be dependable. There are parts of you that had to be stripped away. Old coping mechanisms, old mindsets, old fears disguised as caution. God gently but firmly removed what couldn't come with you. And even though it felt like loss at the time, it was actually liberation. You're lighter now, clearer, more intentional. You don't waste energy on what drains you the way you used to. You're learning how to guard your spirit without hardening your heart. You've also become more aware of how deeply God knows. Oh, not the version you present to others, but the version that wrestles in silence. The version that wants to be strong but sometimes feels fragile. The version that hopes quietly so disappointment doesn't hear. God sees that version and still calls you forward, still trusts you, still affirms the work he's doing in you that alone should settle something deep inside you. You don't need to compare your path to anyone else's anymore. Comparison once tempted you because you were looking for reassurance that you were on the right track. Now reassurance comes from alignment, not similarity. You can celebrate others without questioning yourself. You can honor different callings without minimizing your own. That confidence didn't come from achievement. It came from clarity. There's a tenderness in you now that wasn't there before. Not weakness, but empathy. You notice people more. You listen differently. You understand pain without needing it explained. That sensitivity is a strength, not a liability. God often trusts his most compassionate servants with the most complex assignments because they know how to handle people with care. You've been trained in silence more than in noise, in waiting rooms more than on stages, in hidden seasons more than visible ones, and that training is invaluable. It teaches you how to move without ego, how to serve without resentment, how to lead without domination. When your moment comes, you won't need to announce yourself. Your presence will speak. Eke. There were times you thought you were falling behind, when in reality you were being positioned. God was aligning timing, protecting you from premature exposure, shielding you from responsibilities that would have crushed you before you were ready. You don't see delay the same way anymore. You see it as intentional pacing, as mercy disguised as patience. Your faith has become quieter but stronger, less dramatic, more durable. You don't need constant signs to keep believing. You've learned how to trust God's character, even when his plans unfold slowly. That kind of faith can withstand uncertainty. It doesn't panic when answers take time. It rests in the knowledge that God is consistent even when circumstances fluctuate. You've also learned that obedience sometimes requires letting go of good things to make room for greater ones. That's not loss, that's alignment. And alignment often feels like narrowing before it feels like expansion. God has been simplifying your focus, refining your priorities, clarifying your yes and your no. That clarity is preparing you to move decisively when the time comes. There's a maturity forming in how you see yourself. You're no longer defined by your past mistakes or your future potential alone. You're present, grounded, aware. You accept your humanity without excusing complacency. You extend yourself grace without abandoning growth. That balance is rare and powerful. God is proud of how you've handled obscurity, how you didn't quit when recognition didn't come, how you kept showing up when applause was absent. Obscurity is often the final exam before trust increases. It reveals motives. It exposes endurance. And you passed lessons you didn't even know you were taking. You've been learning how to hear God's voice with clarity, not just in moments of crisis, but in everyday decisions, in pacing, in boundaries, in rest. That ongoing communication is shaping your instincts. Soon, what once required intense prayer will come naturally through discernment, built over time. There's still growth ahead, but it's different now. It's not about proving yourself. It's about stewarding what's been entrusted to you. It's about consistency, not intensity. About faithfulness, not frenzy. God is preparing you for longevity, not just breakthrough. You may still have moments of doubt, but they no longer define you. They visit, they don't stay. You know how to bring them to God instead of letting them consume you. That emotional intelligence didn't come easily. It was earned through experience and reflection. You're beginning. Trust yourself again, not in pride, but in partnership with God. You trust the growth he's done. You trust the wisdom he's given. You trust the discernment he's sharpening. That self-trust, rooted in faith, allows you to move forward without second-guessing every step. The future isn't calling you to become someone new. It's calling you to be fully who you already are. All the refining, all the waiting, G. all the quiet obedience has been uncovering, not creating. God placed this identity in you long before you recognized it. Now you're catching up to what heaven already knew, and as you continue forward, there will be moments where you're tempted to rush, to explain, to justify, to seek reassurance from people instead of God. When that happens, remember how far you've come. Remember the peace you've gained. Remember the clarity you now carry. You don't need to convince anyone of what God is doing in you. What's unfolding will require courage, but not the frantic kind, the steady kind. The kind that keeps moving even when feelings fluctuate. The kind that trusts the process over pressure. That courage is already in you, strengthened by every season you thought you wouldn't survive, but did. So keep walking, keep listening, keep becoming, not striving, not forcing, not pretending, but steadily aligning with the work God is continuing to do within you. Because even now, as your vision deepens and your resolve stabilizes, as your faith matures and your identity settles, the journey is still unfolding, layer by layer, step by step, moment by moment, shaping you further into the one he called, equipped, and trusted from the beginning, as the path ahead continues to open in ways that will ask more of you, while also revealing more of you than ever before, revealing layers you didn't know were there, strengths that only emerge under sustained faith, and wisdom that settles in quietly. Rather than announcing itself, you're starting to understand that becoming isn't about dramatic moments alone. It's about consistency over time. It's about who you are when the excitement fades and the work remains. And you've been showing up for the work day after day, choice after choice. Even when no one was keeping score, there were moments when you felt invisible, when your effort seemed to disappear into the background, when your faithfulness felt unnoticed. But invisibility has a strange power. It removes performance. It strips away ego. It forces you to ask why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. And somewhere in that quiet questioning, your motives purified. You stopped doing things to be seen and started doing them because they were right. That shift changed everything. God has been teaching you how to carry silence without assuming abandonment, how to wait without assuming rejection, how to trust without demanding proof on your timeline. Those lessons were easy, but they were necessary. Because what's ahead won't always come with immediate affirmation either. You're being trained to move by conviction, not validation. You are also learning that growth doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like tension, like stretching, like being held in place while something internal rearranges. That's where you've been, not stuck, but stabilizing, not delayed, but deepened. And deep roots matter. When strong winds come, you become more honed, sent with yourself. You no longer hide behind spiritual language to avoid real work. You face your fears instead of spiritualizing avoidance. You bring your whole self to God, not just the polished part. That honesty is sacred. God can shape what you're willing to reveal. And you've been brave enough to reveal more than you ever have before. There's a humility forming in you that isn't self-diminishing, it's grounded. You know what you bring to the table, but you don't need to dominate the room to prove it. You know your worth, but you don't weaponize it. That balance allows people to trust you. It allows God to entrust you. You've learned that not every open door is an assignment, and not every closed door is a setback. Discernment has taught you patience. Wisdom has taught you restraint. And restraint is often more powerful than action. You don't move just because you can't anymore. You move because you're led. There were seasons when you felt like you were shedding skin, letting go of identities that once felt familiar. That was uncomfortable, even painful. But those identities were built around survival, not calling. God is calling you to something that doesn't require you to stay guarded all the time. Something that invites strength without constant defense. You're beginning to trust rest without guilt, to pause without fear of falling behind, to breathe without assuming everything will collapse if you stop pushing. That's healing. And healing is part of preparation. A tired soul can't sustain a long assignment. You've also learned how to forgive without minimizing the hurt, how to release bitterness without pretending it didn't matter. Forgiveness has softened you without weakening you. It freed your energy for what's ahead instead of anchoring it to what's behind. That freedom is making room for clarity. God has been recalibrating your desires. Things you once chased now feel empty. Things you once ignored now feel significant. That shift isn't random, it's alignment. Your appetite is changing because your purpose is becoming clearer. You've noticed how your intuition has sharpened, how you sense when something is off even if you can't explain it yet, how you recognize peace and disturbance more quickly. That sensitivity is spiritual awareness growing through practice, not perfection. You're also learning how to carry authority without aggression, to speak truth without harshness, to stand firm without clouding your heart. That balance is rare because it requires security. And security comes from knowing who you are in God, not from controlling. Outcomes. There were times you thought your softness was a flaw, but God never asked you to harden, He asked you to anchor. Softness anchored in truth becomes compassion with boundaries, becomes strength that doesn't need to shout. That's the kind of strength God often uses to change environments. You're being prepared to navigate complexity, to lead through nuance, to hold tension without collapsing into extremes. That capacity didn't come naturally. It was formed through seasons where answers weren't simple and faith had to mature beyond black and white. God has also been teaching you how to let people misunderstand you without rushing to correct them. That restraint protects your peace. It also reveals who's willing to seek understanding and who prefers assumptions. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. Alignment will speak louder than explanation. You're starting to see how everything connects. How past pain sharpened empathy. How past delay strengthened discernment. How past disappointment clarified desire. Nothing was wasted. Even the detours taught you how to navigate terrain you'll encounter again, not for survival. This time, but for guidance. Your prayers are becoming more intentional, less scattered, more aligned with purpose than panic. You're not asking God to remove every challenge anymore. You're asking him to shape you through them. That shift changes how heaven responds. You've become someone who values depth over speed, substance over appearance, truth over comfort. That value system will protect you when options increase, when attention grows, when influence expands. Because without values, expansion becomes dangerous. God is proud of how you've handled your own becoming. How you didn't rush to label yourself finished or failed. How you allowed yourself to be a work in progress without quitting on yourself. That patience with your own growth mirrors God's patience with you. You're learning how to celebrate small confirmations without demanding full manifestation. How to honor beginnings without despising process. That perspective keeps you grateful without complacent, hopeful without entitled. There will be moments ahead when old fears try to resurface, when familiar doubts knock again. But they won't have the same authority they once did. You've outgrown them. They'll feel smaller because you've become steadier. You're not who you were and you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in between, and that's sacred space. It's where faith stretches into trust, where calling settles into character, where preparation quietly completes its work. So continue to walk with intention. Continue to listen for guidance in subtle ways. Continue to honor the process even when it feels slow. Because what's being formed in you now isn't just for a moment, it's for endurance. It's for impact that lasts. It's for a life that reflects God's faithfulness, not just in outcomes, but in posture, in presence, in perseverance. As you keep moving forward into the unfolding path that continues to invite you deeper, stronger, wiser, and more aligned with each step you take into what he has been shaping you for all along. So let this be the moment you stop measuring yourself by what you survived and start anchoring yourself in who you've become. Let the past rest without regret. Let the process stand without apology, and let the future open without fear. You are not stepping forward as someone still trying to prove their worth. You are stepping forward as someone who has been prepared with intention, refined with patience, and trusted with purpose. God did not invest this much time in shaping you to abandon the work now. Every layer of growth, every quiet correction, every season of waiting has aligned you for this next stretch of the journey. Walk on with a settled heart and a clear spirit. Carry humility without shrinking, confidence without hardness, and faith without panic. When challenges arise, remember you have already been trained in endurance. When responsibility increases, remember you have already been grounded in character. And when doors open, remember you don't enter them alone. The same God who was with you in the hidden places goes before you in the visible ones. You are not late. You are not lacking. You are not unsure by mistake. You are chosen with precision, formed with care, and becoming exactly who God needed you to be, right? On time, as you step fully into what he has been faithfully preparing all along.